Mike Tyson has been involved in some of the biggest moments in boxing history. Championships, knockouts, upsets. But when most of the world thinks of Mike Tyson, they think of one night, June 28, 1997, the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and the moment Mike bit off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear. Not his knockout power, not his youngest champion record, not even his prison time. The ear bite. That's what the world remembers. It was the most infamous moment in boxing history, maybe in all of sports. And it changed everything. The fight was already chaotic. Mike was frustrated. Evander had been headbutting him all night. Blood was pouring down Mike's face from a cut over his eye. He was losing again. And in a moment of desperation and rage, Mike did the unthinkable. He bit Evander's ear, not once, but twice. The first bite tore off a piece of Evander's ear. Mike spit it onto the canvas. The referee, Mills Lane, deducted 2 points and let the fight continue. Then Mike bit him again, harder. Mills Lane had seen enough. He disqualified Mike. The crowd erupted in chaos. It was the only disqualification loss of Mike's career, and it was a complete meltdown. Today, Mike is 58 years old. He's apologized to Evander multiple times. They've become friends. They've even done commercials together. But the ear bite will follow Mike forever. When people who don't follow boxing think of Mike Tyson, they think of that moment, and Mike knows it. "I was in a dark place," he said in interviews. "I wasn't thinking, I just reacted." It wasn't just a loss, it was a public breakdown, a moment that defined Mike in the worst possible way, and it happened in front of millions watching live. After the Buster Douglas loss in February 1990, Mike's life spiraled. The invincibility was gone. The discipline was gone. And in 1992, Mike was convicted of rape and sentenced to 6 years in prison. He served 3 years, getting released in 1995. When he came out, he was different, quieter, angrier. The young destroyer was gone. In his place was a man carrying years of rage and resentment. But Mike still had his power, and boxing welcomed him back. His comeback was dominant at first. He knocked out Peter McNeely in 89 seconds. He destroyed Buster Mathis Jr. and Frank Bruno. By 1996, Mike had reclaimed the WBC heavyweight title. He was back on top. But he wasn't the same fighter. The speed was slower. The head movement was gone. He relied entirely on power. And when he faced a skilled, disciplined opponent, the crack showed. That opponent was Evander Holyfield. On November 9, 1996, Evander shocked the world by stopping Mike in the 11th round. Mike was frustrated the entire fight. He claimed Evander headbutted him repeatedly. The referees didn't see it or didn't care. Mike lost, and he took it personally. The rematch was scheduled for June 28, 1997. The hype was massive. Could Mike redeem himself? Or would Evander prove the first fight wasn't a fluke? Mike walked into the MGM Grand carrying a grudge. He was obsessed with the headbutts. He believed Evander had cheated, and he was determined to make him pay. But what happened that night wasn't redemption. It was a disaster. Evander Holyfield wasn't just a good fighter, he was one of the greatest of his era. Born in Alabama and raised in Atlanta, Evander had been a standout amateur, winning a bronze medal at the 1984 Olympics. He turned pro and dominated the cruiserweight division before moving up to heavyweight. And unlike most fighters who moved up in weight, Evander thrived. He became the undisputed cruiserweight champion and then the undisputed heavyweight champion. He beat Buster Douglas to win the title. He beat Riddick Bowe in an epic trilogy. He was tough, smart, and fearless, but Evander had a reputation. He used his head, literally. Opponents constantly complained about his headbutts. Some were accidental, some weren't. Evander knew how to work inside, how to tie up opponents, and how to land his head in strategic places. It was part of his game, and it drove fighters crazy. Mike was no exception. In their first fight, Mike had been cut badly by what he claimed were intentional headbutts. The referee, Mitch Halpern, didn't penalize Evander, and Mike never forgot it. For the rematch, Evander came in confident. He'd already beaten Mike once. He knew Mike was frustrated and emotional, and he planned to use that against him. Evander wasn't afraid of Mike. He respected his power, but he didn't fear him. And that confidence, combined with his physical style, was a recipe for disaster. Because Mike wasn't coming to box. He was coming to punish. And when the frustration boiled over, boxing went out the window. The build-up to Tyson versus Holyfield 2 was enormous. The first fight had been a shocking upset. Mike, the former undisputed champion, had been stopped by Evander, a fighter many thought was past his prime. The rematch was billed as Mike's chance at redemption. The MGM Grand in Las Vegas was packed. The pay-per-view numbers were massive. And the tension was palpable. Mike barely spoke during press conferences. When he did, his answers were short and cold. He was focused, angry, obsessed with the headbutts from the first fight. Evander, for his part, was calm and composed. He talked about his faith. He said he wasn't worried about Mike's power. He'd already beaten him once. He could do it again. The contrast was stark. Evander was zen. Mike was a coiled spring, and everyone watching could sense something was going to break. Mike's team tried to keep him focused, but privately they knew he was in a bad place mentally. The prison years had changed him. The loss to Evander had humiliated him, and the headbutts had given him an excuse to channel all his anger. June 28, 1997, the MGM Grand. The crowd was electric. Mike entered the ring with his usual intensity. No robe, black trunks, his eyes locked on Evander. Evander entered calmly, flanked by his team, wearing white trunks with red trim. The referee was Mills Lane, one of the most respected officials in boxing. Lane brought both fighters to the center of the ring and gave his instructions. "Protect yourself at all times," he said. And then the bell rang. What followed would shock the world. From the opening bell, the fight was brutal. Mike came out aggressive, trying to land his signature power shots. Evander clinched, tied Mike up, and worked inside. And almost immediately, the headbutts started. In the first round, Evander's head caught Mike above the right eye. Mike winced. The cut opened. Blood started trickling down his face. Mike looked at the referee. Mills Lane waved them to continue. No penalty. Mike's frustration was already building. The second round was more of the same. Evander used his size and strength to control the clinches. He landed clean punches. And every time they got close, his head seemed to find Mike's face. The cut above Mike's eye got worse. Blood was now flowing freely. Mike's corner tried to stop the bleeding between rounds, but it was clear Mike was getting angrier. He wasn't just losing the fight. He felt like he was being cheated. Again. His punches became wilder, his defense sloppier, and his eyes were filled with rage. By the third round, Mike was desperate. Evander was winning every exchange, the headbutts were relentless, and Mike felt like the referee wasn't doing anything to stop it. In a clinch midway through the round, Evander's head collided with Mike's face again, and that's when Mike snapped. As they separated, Mike leaned in and bit down on Evander's right ear, hard. Evander jumped back, screaming in pain. He hopped around the ring, holding his ear. Blood poured through his glove. And on the canvas, in front of millions of viewers, was a small piece of Evander Holyfield's ear. The arena went silent for a split second. Then chaos. Evander's corner rushed into the ring. The crowd was screaming. Announcers were in disbelief. "He bit his ear," they yelled. "Mike Tyson just bit Evander Holyfield's ear." Mills Lane stepped in immediately. He called time. He walked Mike to his corner and examined the situation. Evander's ear was mangled. The top portion of the cartilage was gone. Mike had spit it onto the canvas. It was grotesque. It was shocking. And it was happening live on pay-per-view. Mills Lane deducted 2 points from Mike, a massive penalty, but he decided to let the fight continue. Evander's corner patched up his ear as best they could. Evander, incredibly, said he wanted to keep fighting. The crowd couldn't believe it. Neither could the commentators. Mills Lane brought both fighters to the center of the ring. "One more time and you're out of here," Lane told Mike. Mike nodded. The fight resumed. But Mike wasn't done. The rage was still boiling, and less than a minute later he bit Evander again. This time, it was even worse. In another clinch, Mike bit down on Evander's left ear. Evander screamed again and shoved Mike away. That was it. Mills Lane immediately waved his arms. Disqualification. The fight was over. Mike Tyson had been disqualified for biting Evander Holyfield's ear. Twice, the crowd erupted. Some booed. Some threw trash into the ring. Mike's corner tried to restrain him, but he was out of control. He lunged toward Evander's corner. Security rushed in. It was complete pandemonium. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Mike had to be escorted out of the ring by security and police. The crowd was throwing bottles and debris. Evander was taken to the hospital to have his ear examined. The piece Mike had bitten off was found on the canvas and placed on ice, but doctors couldn't reattach it. The damage was permanent. The Nevada State Athletic Commission launched an investigation. Mike was fined $3 million and had his boxing license revoked. The media tore him apart. Headlines around the world called him a savage, an animal, a disgrace to the sport. For Evander, the fight cemented his legacy as one of the toughest fighters ever. He'd been bitten twice and still wanted to keep fighting. He handled the situation with grace and dignity. He said he forgave Mike. He didn't press criminal charges, but the image of his mangled ear became one of the most iconic and disturbing images in sports history. For Mike, the fallout was devastating. He lost millions in fines and endorsements. His reputation, already damaged by prison, was destroyed. The ear bite became the defining moment of his career. Not his championships, not his knockouts. The bite. Mike would eventually get his license back and return to boxing, but he was never the same. The ear bite followed him everywhere. Late-night talk shows made jokes. It became a punchline. Even people who didn't follow boxing knew about it. Mike became a caricature, and for years he carried the shame and anger of that night. But slowly over time, something changed. Mike began to own it. He talked about it in interviews. He apologized publicly. And eventually, he and Evander reconciled. They even appeared together in commercials, laughing about the incident. But the damage was done. The ear bite would be Mike's legacy. Mike Tyson is 58 years old now. He's lived a full life since that night in June 1997. More fights, more losses, retirement, a one-man show, podcasts, a cannabis business. He's become a pop culture icon in his later years, appearing in movies and commercials, often playing a self-aware version of himself. And he's talked openly about the ear bite. "It was the lowest point of my career," he said. "I let my emotions control me. I wasn't thinking about boxing. I was thinking about hurting him." There's regret in his voice when he discusses it. Not because he lost the fight, but because he lost control. Evander Holyfield is 62 years old. He continued fighting long after the Mike incidents, eventually retiring in 2011. He's remained active in boxing as a commentator and trainer, and he's always handled the ear bite incident with class. "I forgave Mike a long time ago," Evander has said. "We've both moved on." The two men have appeared together multiple times, even joking about the incident in a Super Bowl commercial. Their reconciliation has been genuine, but the ear bite remains a permanent part of both their legacies. The fight itself is rarely discussed for its boxing. It's discussed for the bite. And that's the tragedy. Mike Tyson was one of the most talented heavyweights in history. But on June 28, 1997, he became known for something else entirely. The ear bite overshadowed everything. And for the millions who watched it live, it's an image they'll never forget. June 28, 1997 will forever be remembered as the night Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear. Not as a great boxing match, not as a competitive fight, but as the most infamous moment in boxing history. It was shocking, grotesque, and broadcast live to millions. And it became the defining image of Mike's career. For boxing fans, the ear bite represents the ultimate loss of control. A fighter so desperate, so frustrated, that he abandoned the sport entirely and resorted to savagery. But the bite also tells a deeper story. It was the culmination of years of anger, frustration, and mental decline. Mike had been in prison. He'd lost his invincibility. He'd been humiliated by Buster Douglas and Evander Holyfield. And in that moment, all of it came out. He didn't bite Evander because he was a bad person. He bit him because he was broken. And that breakdown happened in front of the world. The ear bite wasn't just a disqualification, it was a cry for help. Here's the final question. Was the ear bite the end of Mike Tyson's boxing career, or just another chapter in a long, complicated story? In many ways, it was both. Mike continued to fight for several more years. He had some wins, he had more losses, but he was never taken seriously again. The ear bite had turned him into a sideshow. The fear was gone. The respect was gone. And Mike knew it. The ear bite didn't end his career, but it ended his legacy as a fighter and turned him into something else entirely. A cautionary tale, a meme, a man who for one night let his demons win.